The priest had just asked if anyone had anything against the marriage when the groom's phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times. Peter Vance checked the screen, went the color of the bride's veil, and walked down the center aisle of the church without saying a word, slowly at first, then nearly running until he shoved open the wooden door and disappeared into the midday sun. Anna Moore stayed standing at the altar with the bouquet in her hand and 300 people holding their breath behind her. Her mother fainted on the pew. Fainted in a strange way, actually. She didn't scream, didn't grab onto anyone, just closed her eyes and slid sideways, as if her body had decided on its own that this was too much. Anna's father ran after Peter, shouting his name with the voice of a man who'd worked 6 months of overtime to pay for that reception, and was now watching his investment walk out the door. The bridesmaids, 4 women in coral dresses who'd spent the entire morning laughing and taking pictures, looked at each other without knowing what to do. One of them reached a hand toward Anna and stopped mid-gesture, as if touching the bride would confirm that this was actually happening. Anna didn't move, didn't cry. She stood there with the veil covering a face no one could read, listening to the sound of 300 people whispering at the same time. That buzzing that sounds like bees, starting low and growing, mixing pity with outrage with that quiet pleasure certain people feel when the misfortune belongs to someone else. The bouquet slipped from her hand and hit the marble floor with a dull thud that echoed through the entire church. That's when the man in the last row stood up. Anna had never seen that face. Strong features, dark hair with a few silver threads at the temples, eyes a shade of blue that didn't match anything in that scene. The grey suit fit well in a way that even people who know nothing about clothes could tell it hadn't come off a department store rack. He crossed the center aisle with a calm that made no sense. 300 people in a panic, and this man walking as though he were in a hotel corridor. He stopped in front of her. Anna smelled his cologne before she heard his voice, a woody note, understated, one of those fragrances you notice but can't name. The man leaned close to her ear and introduced himself as John Maddox. He said what he was about to propose was insane, but she could say no and he'd go back to his pew without making a scene. He asked her to pretend he was the groom. Anna stared at him the way you stare at someone who's lost their mind. But John was already pulling from his jacket pocket a white gold ring that gleamed with an intensity that didn't match something kept at the bottom of a pocket. It looked like a ring that had been chosen for someone, not stumbled upon by accident. He slid it onto Anna's finger, almost perfect, just a thread too loose, as if it had been made for a hand similar to hers, but not exactly hers. Anna said yes without knowing why, or knowing why, and preferring not to examine the reason too closely. John turned to the guests and announced, in a voice that didn't waver, that there had been a misunderstanding. Peter Vance was a jealous ex-boyfriend who had tried to sabotage the ceremony. He, John Maddox, was the real groom. It was a lie so enormous it should have collapsed right there. But he spoke with a conviction that made at least half that church doubt what they had just seen with their own eyes. The priest, who no longer knew what to do with his hands, asked if the 2 of them wanted to continue. John turned to Anna. She agreed for the second time in 3 minutes, and this time even she didn't know if she was accepting the marriage or just asking for this nightmare to have some kind of script. They left the church hand in hand, under a shower of rice thrown more out of reflex than conviction. Anna's mother, back on her feet but with the color of someone who hadn't entirely returned, watched John with that face that's half gratitude, half, "Who are you and what do you want with my daughter?" Her father clenched his fists in the pockets of his rented suit. In the back seat of the Mercedes, a car Anna had only ever seen on television, she started to tremble. It wasn't cold, it wasn't crying. Her body was collecting the bill for what her mind hadn't finished processing yet. John took off his jacket and placed it over her shoulders without saying anything. He stayed there quiet while she shook, and that was the first thing Anna registered about him, that he knew how to be quiet without it turning into awkwardness. When she could speak, she wanted to know who he was, what he wanted, and how much all of this was going to cost. John said he was a businessman, a widower. His wife had died of cancer 3 years before. His sister had been through the same thing as Anna 15 years earlier, and it had stuck to him in a way that time hadn't taken away. Anna asked about the ring, why he had a ring in his pocket if he was there by chance. John gave the first smile since she'd known him, that is, since she'd known him, which had been about 20 minutes. He said he always carried his wife's ring in her memory. When he decided to step in, he figured Isabella wouldn't mind him using it to help someone else. Anna leaned back in the car seat and asked, without quite knowing why, was she the one who picked that ring? John turned toward the window. He took half a second longer than normal before answering. She's the one who picked it. And he quickly followed up with a story about their honeymoon in Lisbon, about how Isabella loved custard tarts and walking barefoot along the coast. Anna let him talk. The car was passing along the river, and the sun hit the water in a way that made everything look golden and unreal. The estate was on the outskirts of town, olive trees everywhere, and a silence that hurt your ears after the noise of that morning. John gave her a room of her own and told her the door was hers, that nobody was going to cross it without being invited. On the first night, Anna didn't sleep. She sat on the bed and kept turning the white gold ring on her finger, slowly with her thumb. Under the pillow, her phone buzzed with messages she didn't want to read. Cousin Carmen, the bridesmaids, numbers she didn't recognize. The only one she opened was from her mother. "Call me when you can, you don't have to explain anything." She didn't call. She closed her eyes and let the sound of crickets and wind through the olive trees take over, and she thought about her grandmother, who used to say every night that true love always comes. You just have to wait. She had waited. What came was Peter Vance, and now she was lying in a stranger's house with a ring on her finger and a fairy tale shattered on the floor of a church. A week went by before Anna could bring herself to call her mother. Marlene picked up on the first ring, which meant she'd been holding the phone since the day of the wedding. She didn't ask anything. Just let out, "I knew it, sweetheart," in a tone that could have meant 15 different things, and Anna didn't want to find out which. At the estate, life had a rhythm Anna didn't recognize. John woke up before sunrise to walk among the olive trees. She watched from the bedroom window, his silhouette disappearing between the trees while it was still dark. He'd come back with his shirt damp from the dew and make coffee without asking if she wanted any, just set the cup on the table. Anna drank it. That coffee tasted like an old ritual, like a gesture he used to make for someone before her and now repeated out of habit, without realizing that every cup carried the weight of another person. It was that week that Cousin Carmen sent the link. A news article about a man arrested for romantic fraud, 8 women in 10 years, promises of marriage, borrowed money that never came back. The name was Peter Vance. The photo was Peter Vance. The article mentioned the bride abandoned at the cathedral, rescued by the intervention of John Maddox, founder of one of the country's largest business groups, with operations in olive oil, real estate, and luxury hospitality. Anna read the sentence 3 times. She put the phone down on the kitchen table and went to John's study. He had his back to her on the phone, and when he saw her face, he hung up without saying goodbye to whoever was on the other end. Anna crossed her arms in the doorway of the study. "Why didn't you tell me who you are?" John didn't look away. He said he hadn't lied. He'd said he was a businessman, and he was. The details hadn't seemed important. He wanted her to know him as a person, not as a name on a magazine list. Then came another revelation. His lawyers had found out that Peter owed money to dangerous people. If the wedding had actually gone through, Anna would have become legally responsible for his debts. Anna leaned against the study wall, hands on her hips, breathing in short pieces. John had saved her twice without her knowing, from the humiliation and from the ruin. She opened her mouth to thank him, and what came out was a laugh. A strange laugh, not funny at all, the kind your body lets out when it doesn't know whether the situation calls for tears or laughter and decides to do both at the same time. John waited for her to stop. When she did, Anna wiped her eyes with her sleeve and murmured, "Sorry, I don't know what's happening to me." John leaned against the doorframe and answered quietly, "That's okay. I wouldn't know either." That night, Anna couldn't sleep again, but for a different reason. The same church, the same day, the same dress could be at the same time the worst and the best thing that had ever happened in her life, and her mind didn't know where to file a piece of information like that. She went to the bathroom to wash her face and opened the medicine cabinet looking for cotton pads. At the back of the shelf, behind a box of bandages, there was a perfume. Bottle half full, no dust, pink cap. Anna opened it and breathed in, a floral scent, fresh, the kind a young woman wears. It wasn't a perfume from 3 years ago. She closed the bottle, put it back, and went back to bed without mentioning it to anyone. From the bedroom, she heard John answer his phone in the hallway. His voice was different, low, tense, impatient in a way she'd never heard. She caught only a fragment of the conversation. John said, "I already explained, there's nothing left to talk about," and hung up. When he passed by her bedroom door, Anna pretended to be asleep. He stopped there for 2 seconds. She knew because she counted his footsteps stopping and starting again, and continued to his room. The next morning, Anna asked if everything was all right. John answered, office stuff, a deal that won't close, and smiled. The smile was good, but it didn't reach his eyes. The months went by. When by isn't right, the months kept pushing things forward, whether you want them to or not. Anna already knew that John woke up early to walk among the olive trees, but she also discovered that he read Spanish poetry before bed, that he made a special rice dish on Sundays when he had nothing else going on, and that he knew every corner of the city the way you know the way home in the dark. He liked flamenco, not the tourist stage kind with rehearsed clapping, but the kind in a small bar with plastic chairs and a 70-year-old man who sang as if he were talking to someone who'd already died. The kind of bar that serves beer in a plain glass, and where nobody asks for a menu because the menu is whatever they've got. It was at one of those bars that Anna realized she was in trouble. John had ordered 2 beers and was explaining the difference between 2 styles of Cante, the slower, deeper one, and the darker, more haunting one, when Anna stopped listening to what he was saying and started paying attention to the way he moved his hands while he talked. Big hands with an old scar on his left thumb that she'd never noticed. She thought, "I'm screwed," and downed the rest of her beer in one gulp. With Peter it had been fireworks. Pretty, loud, and the next day all that's left is the smell of gunpowder and burned paper on the ground. John was a different story. He came down for coffee in the morning knowing he'd be there. The 2 of them could sit in silence without anyone needing to fill it. And more than anything, he saw her, really saw her. Not the made-up, optimistic version she presented to the world, but the one who woke up with dark circles and snapped at people before 8 in the morning. One afternoon in October, they were cleaning up the kitchen after a Sunday lunch. Anna's parents had left an hour before. Her father already called John by his first name and had discovered, with a shock that almost made up for everything else, that the millionaire was a die-hard Cubs fan. Her mother still had that look of someone putting together a jigsaw puzzle without the picture on the box, but she'd accepted a second helping of pot roast. Anna was putting glasses away in the upper cabinet when she asked John for help reaching the shelf. He stretched up, and his phone slipped out of his back pocket and fell on the tile floor screen-up. On the screen, a notification from someone named Renata with a heart emoji next to the name. Anna saw it. John saw that Anna saw it. He picked up the phone fast, put it back in his pocket, and offered an explanation that came out too quickly, too ready. "Old friend from college. She's always forwarding chain messages." And he laughed. Anna laughed too. The kind of laugh 2 people share when neither of them finds it funny, but laughing is easier than asking. That night, Anna went out to the porch. The irritation from the phone was still there, lodged somewhere between her stomach and her throat, and she carried it with her without meaning to. John was sitting facing the city lights with a glass of wine that must have been there a while because he'd barely touched it. Anna sat next to him. They didn't talk for a stretch that could have been 2 minutes or 20. Anna was the first to break the silence, and her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "I need to tell you something." John waited. Anna pressed her hands together in her lap. I don't know, this whole thing is turning into something different from what I imagined. Different isn't the word." She swallowed. "More. It's becoming more." He didn't answer right away. He kept facing the darkness beyond the olive trees, and Anna had time to regret it about 4 times before he opened his mouth. When he spoke, John didn't turn to her. He lowered his eyes to the glass. "Isabella made me promise something. That I wouldn't... Anyway, He swirled the wine in the glass without drinking. "And I spent 3 years thinking it was one of those promises you make so the person can go in peace. Then that day at the church I saw you standing there and—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Anna didn't kiss him that night. She stayed there beside him without saying another word, listening to the sound of the crickets and feeling the weight of the name Renata and the red heart sinking slowly to the back of her mind. Because she wanted to be there on that porch with that man, and sometimes you push things to the back not because they're small, but because what's on the surface seems too big to share the space. They got married again, this time in a small ceremony with Anna's parents, cousin Carmen, and a justice of the peace who seemed relieved that no groom was running away. Their daughter was born a year later. They named her Isabella, and John cried in that quiet way that makes no sound, no sobbing, no shaking, just water running down his face while he held the baby as if his body were settling a debt it had been carrying for a long time. The second came 2 years later. Paul, his father's blue eyes, the smile of someone who doesn't know anything yet. Anna opened a tutoring center for children with learning difficulties. She called it Second Chances, because sometimes the right name is the most obvious one. Peter Vance got 6 years. Anna didn't go to the trial. On an unremarkable Wednesday night, Isabella was already asleep. Paul had just finished nursing. John sat on the kitchen stool, the one against the wall, and said he needed to tell her something he should have told her before. His voice was different. It wasn't the office voice or the porch with wine voice. It was a voice Anna hadn't heard yet, and that before the words even came, already tightened something inside her. John told her that on that day at the cathedral, he wasn't there by chance, and he wasn't there for the architecture. He'd been on the street out front, waiting for a woman named Renata, whom he'd been dating for 4 months. They had plans for lunch. He had bought a ring 3 weeks earlier. He was going to propose to her at that lunch. The ring he'd placed on Anna's finger was the ring he'd bought for Renata. Anna stopped washing the glass she was washing. She didn't put it down. She held it under the running water, her eyes on the suds. John went on. The story about I always carry Isabella's ring. He'd made it up in the back seat of the Mercedes when Anna asked, and he needed an answer that fit the moment. In the weeks that followed, as he fell in love with her without planning to, he ended things with Renata. The perfume in the bathroom was hers, the phone call in the hallway, hers too, and the name with the heart on the phone, hers, of course. He should have deleted it sooner. It was like rereading a sentence and realizing the comma had been in the wrong place the whole time, and the meaning was something else entirely. The gleam of the ring that looked too new. The half-second hesitation when Anna asked, was she the one who picked it? The perfume too fresh to be 3 years old. The tense voice in the hallway saying, there's nothing left to talk about, which wasn't any business deal at all. It was a woman asking for an explanation he wouldn't give. The hollow laugh in the kitchen when the phone showed the name. Anna held the glass in her hand for a stretch of time she couldn't measure. The water ran. John waited. Anna set the glass in the sink and turned to face him. You lied to me. John lowered his head before answering. About the ring. Yes. Anna leaned against the counter, arms crossed. About the rest? John raised his eyes for the first time since he'd started talking. About the rest? No. Anna turned off the faucet. She dried her hands on the dish towel, slowly, one finger at a time, as if that gesture were the most important thing in the world. Peter lied about everything, about work, about where he was, about what he felt. John had lied about one thing. One. And she kept turning that over in her head, not knowing what to do with the difference between the two, whether the difference was big enough, or whether a lie is a lie and size doesn't change its nature. Anna hung the towel on the hook and spoke without turning around. Does the gesture become smaller or bigger because of it? But she was asking herself. John didn't answer. Anna turned off the kitchen light and went to the bedroom. She lay down on the left side, her side. John lay down on the right a few minutes later. Neither of them spoke, but when he reached his hand out in the dark and touched his fingers to hers, Anna didn't pull away. They stayed like that, in the dark, fingers touching, and outside, The wind shook the olive trees with that sound that seems like rain but isn't. 5 years after the day she was abandoned at the altar, Anna went back to that church. Not for a ceremony, for something else she wouldn't know how to name. She walked in with the children through the same door Peter had fled from. The light hit the stained glass and made rainbows on the marble floor, just like that day. Isabella tugged at the hem of her skirt. "Mum, why are you so quiet?" Anna crouched down to her daughter's height. She told her that once upon a time a girl thought she was going to marry a prince, but the prince ran away. Then someone else showed up, who wasn't really a prince but was better. Isabella frowned. "Why?" Anna thought for a second. "Because he stayed." They walked out of the church together, Paul in John's arms, Isabella holding Anna's hand, the four of them passing through the same wooden door that 5 years earlier had swung shut behind a man running away. The sun hit Anna's face, and she smelled the orange trees, the same scent from that June morning when she had woken up at 5, thinking it was going to be the most beautiful day of her life. It hadn't been the most beautiful. But when Isabella pulled her by the hand, and Paul made that sleepy face he always made when he wanted to be held, Anna thought that maybe beautiful was too small a word for what it had become.